The old civic hall had been closed for 11 years. Not derelict, maintained from the outside with the particular civic dignity of a building that still meant something to the people responsible for it, but closed. The kind of closed that accumulates its own silence, layer by layer, until the silence itself becomes part of the structure. Restoration had begun 3 weeks ago. A careful, methodical process, the building being opened from the outside in, layer by layer, each one revealing what the previous decade's maintenance had covered rather than resolved. Victorian buildings kept their secrets in their walls. This one had kept something else entirely. On the morning of the 18th day of restoration, a workman's hammer found a hollow behind the west wall of the second floor. Not a structural void, not a crack or a fault. A space, deliberate, sealed. They opened it carefully. The foreman had enough experience to understand that what a Victorian builder seals deliberately is worth opening with the same deliberateness. 3 courses of brick, then a wooden door, locked, then, beyond it, a room. Small, perhaps 4 meters by 3. The dust on every surface undisturbed. A century of accumulation, perfectly preserved by the seal. On the floor at the room's center, a single iron box. Locked, and on the wall above it, scratched into the plaster in a careful Victorian hand, a date, 1891, and below the date, 4 words. Do not open this. The foreman took a photograph, made 2 telephone calls, the first to the restoration company's project manager, the second, on the advice of the project manager who knew whose building this had once been, and who in Blackwood would need to know immediately, to the Mercer Historical Guild.
Every case begins with something someone was not meant to find. The interesting question is never what was found. It is always why someone needed it not to be.
The Casebook of Percival Wick. Case 1. The Mercer Vault. Percy arrived at the Civic Hall at 9:30. Will Mercer was already there, standing in the doorway of the sealed room with a flashlight and a measuring tape, neither of which he had used yet. He was simply looking. Percy had been told by the project manager who had called him that a young historian from the guild had been on site since 7. He had not been told that the young historian would be standing in a doorway, doing nothing, with the particular quality of attention that Percy associated with people who understood that looking carefully was itself a form of work. Percy stood beside him. Neither spoke. They looked at the room together for a moment.
You're Percy Wick.
You're a Mercer.
5th generation, which means this building was sealed during my great-great-grandfather's tenure as guild chairman, which means
the guild knew about this room before anyone else did, and chose not to mention it.
That would appear to be the case, yes.
Percy looked at him, the expression of someone reassessing an initial assumption. not dramatically, but with the particular efficiency of a man who updated his understanding as quickly as new information arrived. Will Mercer had called Percy because he needed someone who could investigate the people involved, rather than just the room. He had called Percy knowing that the investigation might lead directly back to his own family. That was either very brave or very calculated. Percy suspected both. Percy stepped into the room, moved along the wall, gloved hand not quite touching the plaster, reading the surface. Will followed, measuring tape out now, recording the room's dimensions with the methodical precision of someone for whom measurement was a form of understanding.
Tell me about the building, what it was, what it was used for.
Civic Hall, built 1882, administration offices on the ground floor, public meeting rooms on the first. This floor was originally storage and records. Municipal archives. Decommissioned in 1923, when the new council offices opened. The building has changed hands 3 times since then. Last used as a community centre. Closed 11 years ago when the roof required more work than the budget allowed.
And this room?
Doesn't appear on any architectural record I can find. Not the original 1882 plans. Not the 1923 decommission survey. Not the 1987 community centre conversion plans. It simply isn't here. On paper.
A room that doesn't exist on paper. A box on the floor. An instruction on the wall, written by someone who expected to be obeyed. The guild paid to keep this room sealed and off the record. The question was not what was in the box. The question was what someone in 1891 was so certain needed to stay hidden that they paid an institution to keep it hidden, rather than simply destroying it.
Percy crouched beside the iron box. Old, solid, the lock of Victorian design he recognized, the kind used for document storage rather than valuables. Someone had not been protecting something precious. They had been protecting something legible.
Can you open it?
The guild will have the key. If the guild sealed this room, the guild kept the means to unseal it. That's how my family works. Everything documented. Everything preserved. Even the things they were paid to make disappear.
Percy looked at Will, the expression of a detective who has just understood something useful about the person he is working with.
Then we need to go to the guild.
The Mercer Historical Guild occupied a Victorian terrace on a quiet Blackwood street. Well maintained, the brass plaque beside the door polished to the particular shine of something attended to weekly rather than occasionally. Inside, high ceilings, dark wood paneling, shelving along every wall. The accumulated archive of 5 generations of a family that had made it their business to remember what Blackwood used to be. Will moved through it with the ease of someone who had grown up in these rooms. Percy moved through it reading it, the organization of the shelving, the dates on the archive boxes, the particular quality of an institution that kept everything and discarded nothing.
Every property the guild has ever been involved with has its own file. Even the ones we were paid to forget about. especially those, actually. My family's philosophy: if you're going to keep a secret, keep a perfect record of keeping it, in case you ever need to prove you kept it.
That is either very principled or very calculating.
In my experience, it's both. Here.
A slim file. The label on its spine read Civic Hall, West 2nd, 1891. Inside, a single sheet of correspondence, a receipt, and a small iron key on a length of old cord.
There it is.
Percy was reading the correspondence, not the key. The letter, a single page, formal Victorian handwriting, the Guild's founding chairman addressed by name.
The letter was from a solicitor, a firm whose name I didn't recognize, which was itself information. A Blackwood solicitor acting on behalf of an unnamed client. The Guild was instructed to seal the room at the Civic Hall, remove it from all architectural records, retain the key, and make no further inquiry into the contents of the iron box. In return, a sum, significant for 1891. Enough that a founding chairman would accept the instruction without pressing for details. The client is unnamed.
Which means the solicitor knew, and the solicitor's firm
is no longer in practice.
dissolved, 1897, 6 years after this letter was written.
That's a familiar pattern.
Is it?
A professional service rendered. The firm dissolved shortly after. The records minimized.
Will looked at Percy. The expression of someone who has just understood that the case he called Percy to investigate is connected to something considerably larger than a sealed room in a Victorian building.
Should I open the box?
Yes.
Will lifted the documents out with the careful hands of a historian, the instinct to preserve competing with the need to read. He set them on the Guild's reading table. Percy stood beside him. They read in silence.
Architectural drawings, original plans for the Civic Hall, but not the plans on record. A second set, showing something the official plans did not. A tunnel, running from the west wall of the second floor, from exactly the location of the sealed room, downward and outward. Toward a destination, the drawings marked only with a reference number. No street name, no building name, just a number. 14.
Will set the drawings down. His face had changed. Not dramatically, but the particular shift of someone who has just read something that recontextualizes everything they thought they knew about a place they have lived their entire life.
There's a tunnel from the Civic Hall. It connects to something.
Reference number 14.
That's not an address. That's an internal designation. Someone else's numbering system.
Yes.
Percy. The Mercer Guild was founded in 1887, 4 years before this room was sealed. We were paid to hide a room containing a tunnel that connects to something designated by someone else's numbering system. and the solicitor who arranged the payment dissolved their firm 6 years later.
I know.
What does that mean?
It means the guild didn't know what they were protecting. They were paid well enough not to need to know. And whoever paid them understood that an institution that keeps perfect records of its secrets is safer than an institution that destroys them. Because the record proves the silence was maintained.
Percy spent the afternoon working backward from the dissolved solicitor's firm. The records of a practice that ceased to exist in 1897 distributed across 3 separate archives, none of them complete, each one requiring the other 2 to make sense. It was the kind of work that rewarded patience more than intelligence. Percy had both.
The firm had handled 11 matters in the 6 years between its founding and its dissolution. 10 of them were routine: property conveyancing, estate administration, the ordinary business of a small Victorian legal practice. The 11th was not routine. The 11th was the civic hall room. The payment came from a private account. The account was held in the name of a society. The society's registered address was 14 Aldersgate Street.
Percy stopped. Stood on the pavement with the particular stillness of a man who has just found a thread he recognizes, pulling through a case he did not expect to find it in.
The reference number 14. What have you found?
The tunnel in the drawings runs northeast from the Civic Hall. I've been cross-referencing the angle and distance against the Guild's Victorian street maps. At the scale the drawings use, 14 would place the tunnel's destination approximately here, below a building on Aldersgate Street. The drawings were made in 1889, 2 years before the room was sealed, which means the tunnel existed before the room was sealed. The room wasn't built to hide the tunnel. The room was built to hide the tunnel's entrance.
Will, the payment for sealing the room came from a registered society. Their address was 14 Aldersgate Street.
They paid the Guild to seal the entrance to their own tunnel.
They paid the Guild to seal an entrance they no longer needed and did not want found. The tunnel still exists. The destination still exists. They simply removed one point of access and ensured no record remained of its having existed.
The Mercer Guild has been protecting the entrance to someone else's tunnel for 130 years, without knowing what it connected to.
Without needing to know. That was the arrangement.
Percy, my family's institution has been unknowingly protecting access to something connected to a society at 14 Aldersgate Street for 5 generations. What is at 14 Aldersgate Street?
Percy looked at the pavement, at the grey Blackwood afternoon, at the particular shape of a case that had just become considerably larger than a sealed room in a civic hall.
I'll tell you when I see you. Not on the telephone.
Evening at the Guild. The drawings spread on the reading table, the documents from the iron box beside them. Will had made tea, a detail Percy noted, filing it alongside the measuring tape and the careful hands, and the willingness to call Percy, knowing the investigation might lead back to his own family. Will Mercer was the kind of person who made tea when something significant had happened, which was the kind of person Percy found consistently useful.
The organisation at 14 Aldersgate Street has been in Blackwood since 1887. They operate quietly. They manage things, disappearances, inconvenient records, access points that need to be closed. They pay professionals to do specific tasks and arrange for those professionals to be unavailable afterward. The Guild was one of those professionals. The solicitor's firm was another.
You know about them.
I know some of what they have done. I know considerably less about what they are.
Will looked at the drawings. The tunnel marked in careful Victorian ink, running from the room he had stood in this morning toward a destination his family had been paid not to think about.
The tunnel still exists.
Almost certainly.
Which means there is an entrance somewhere in the civic hall, below the sealed room, below the floor, that connects to whatever is at 14 Aldersgate Street.
Yes.
Are we going to find it?
Not today. Today we know what the room was protecting and who paid for it to be protected. That is enough for today.
But not enough.
No, not enough.
Will looked at him. The expression of someone who had spent the day discovering that the institution his family built had been used, unknowingly, as a component in something much larger, and who had decided, in the face of that discovery, that he wanted to understand the rest of it rather than set it aside.
I grew up in this building. I know every archive box on every shelf. I know the history of every property the Guild has ever been involved with. If this organisation at 14 Aldersgate Street has used the Guild's work as cover before, this won't be the only instance.
No.
Then I should look.
Yes, you should.
Will picked up the slim file from 1891, set it alongside the drawings and the iron box documents, began methodically to make a separate pile of the Guild's records he would need to go through.
He had grown up walking past the entrance to something without knowing it was there. That is a particular kind of discovery. The kind that reorganizes everything you thought you understood about a place you have always known. I recognized it. I had stood in Blackwood Alley for months before I thought to look up. Will, when you find something, and you will find something, call me.
How will I know if it's significant?
If it makes you want to look away from it, it's significant.
Percy left. Will remained at the reading table, the lamp warm beside him, the Guild's archive waiting. The tunnel below the Civic Hall connected to something that had been operating in Blackwood for 130 years. One entrance had been sealed in 1891. Another, somewhere, was still open. Will Mercer began to look. The Casebook of Percival Wick. Case 1. The Mercer Vault. Case closed.